Tonight, we drift into a quieter world where a little girl weeps over the loss of a toothless pug, where a poor washerwoman's sacrifice is misunderstood by the world, where an old bachelor's nightcap conjures the phantom of a lost love, and where the blind daughter of a wise man seeks the stone of truth. Under the willow tree, the country around the town of Kyoga is very bare. The town itself lies by the seashore, which is always beautiful, although it might be more beautiful than it is, because all around are flat fields and a forest a long way off. But one always finds something beautiful in the spot that is one's own home, something for which one longs even when one is in the most wonderful spot in the world. And we must admit that the outer edge of Kyoga, where small, humble gardens line the little stream that flows into the sea, could be very pretty in the summertime. This was the opinion of the two small children, Knud and Johanna, who were playing there, crawling under the gooseberry bushes to reach each other. In one of the gardens, there stood an elder tree, in the other an old willow, and under the latter the children were especially fond of playing. Although the tree stood close beside the stream, and they might easily have fallen into the water, they were allowed to play there, for the eye of God watches over little ones. Otherwise, they would be very badly off indeed. Besides, these two were careful about the water. In fact, the boy was so afraid of it that in the summer he could not be lured into the sea, where the other children were fond of splashing about. As a result, he had to bear the teasing of the others as best he could. But once, Johanna the little girl dreamed she was out in a boat, and Knud waded out to join her with the water rising until it closed over his head. And from the moment little Knud heard of this dream, he could no longer bear to be called a coward. He might really go into the water now, he said, since Johanna had dreamed it. He never carried that idea into practice, but for all that, the dream remained his great pride. Their poor parents often came together, while Knud and Johanna played in the gardens or on the high road, where a long row of willows had been planted along the ditch. These trees, with their polled tops, certainly did not look very beautiful, but they were there for use rather than for ornament. The old willow tree in the garden was much lovelier, which was why the children took most delight in sitting under it. In Kjög itself was a great marketplace, and at fair time this plaza was gay, with whole streets of tents filled with silk ribbons, boots, and everything a person might desire. There were great crowds then, and generally the weather was rainy. One could easily smell the odor of peasants' clothes, but this could not destroy the fragrance that streamed from a booth full of honey cakes. And best of all, the man who kept this particular booth came every year during fair time to lodge in the house of little Knude's parents. Consequently, every now and then, there was a present of a bit of honey cake. And of course, Johann always received her share. But the best thing of all was that this gingerbread dealer knew all sorts of charming stories and could even tell tales about his own gingerbread cakes. One evening, he told a story about them, which made such a deep impression on the two children that they never forgot it. For that reason, perhaps we should hear it too, especially since it is not very long. On the shop counter, he said, there once lay 2 gingerbread cakes. One was in the shape of a man with a hat on, the other of a maiden with no bonnet, but with a blot of yellow on top of her head. Both their faces were on the upper side, for that was the side that was supposed to be looked at, and not the other. Indeed, most people have one side from which they should be viewed. On his left side, the man wore a bitter almond for a heart, but the maiden, on the other hand, was honey cake all through. They were placed on the counter as samples, so they remained there for a long time until at last they fell in love with each other. But neither told the other, which they should have done if they had expected anything to come of it. I is a man, so he must speak first, thought the maiden. But she was quite contented, for she knew in her heart that her love was returned. His thoughts were far more extravagant, which is just like a man. He dreamed that he was a street urchin, and that he had 4 pennies, all his own, and that he bought the maiden and ate her up. So they lay on the counter for days and weeks and grew dry, but the thoughts of the maiden remained still gentle and womanly. It's enough for me that I have lived on the same table with him, thought the maiden, and then she broke in 2. If only she had known of my love, she would have held together a little longer, thought he. So that's the story, and here they are, both of them, said the baker. They're remarkable for their strange history and for their silent love, which never came to anything. And now they're both for you. With that, he gave Johanni the man who was still in one piece, and Knud got the broken maiden. But the children had been untouched by the story, that they couldn't be so bold as to eat up the lovers. Next day, they took them out to the Kjöge churchyard, where winter and summer, lovely ivy covers the church wall like a rich carpet. They stood the 2 cake figures up among the green leaves in the bright sunshine, and told a group of other children the story of the silent love that was useless. That is to say, the love was for the story was charming, they all found. But when they looked again at the gingerbread couple, they found that a mischievous big boy had eaten up the broken maiden. The children cried about that, and later, probably so that the poor lover might not be left alone in the world, they ate him up too. but they never forgot the story. The two children were always together by the elder tree or under the willow, and little Johanna sang the most beautiful songs in a voice as clear as a silver bell. Knud had not a note of music in him, but at least he knew the words of the songs, and that was something. But the people of Kyoga, even the wife of the hardware merchant, stopped and listened when Johanna sang. "She has a very sweet voice, that little girl," she said. Those were glorious days. But glorious days do not last forever. And finally, the neighbors separated. Johanne's mother died, and her father planned to marry again in Copenhagen, where he had been promised a position as messenger, a job supposed to be very profitable. While the neighbors parted with regrets, the children wept bitterly, but the parents promised to write to each other at least once a year, and Knud was made apprentice to a shoemaker. For such a big boy was too old to run around wild any longer. And furthermore, he was confirmed. Oh, how he would have liked to see little Johanna in Copenhagen on that day of celebration. But he didn't go, and he had never been there. Although Kyoga is only 5 Danish miles away. On a clear day, Knud could see the distant towers of the city across the bay, and on the day of his confirmation, he could even see the golden cross on the tower of the Church of Our Lady glitter in the sun. Ah, how often his thoughts turned toward Johanna. And did she remember him? Yes. At Christmas time, a letter came from her father to Knud's parents, saying that they were doing very well in Copenhagen, and Johanna could look forward to a brilliant career on the strength of her lovely voice. She already had a position in the opera house and was already earning a little money, out of which she sent her dear neighbors of Kyoga $1 for a Merry Christmas Eve. Johanna herself added a postscript asking them to drink to her health, and in the same postscript was also written, "Friendly greetings to Knud." They all wept. But this was all very pleasant, for they were tears of joy that they shed. Knud's thoughts had been with Johanna every day, and now he knew that she also thought of him. The nearer came the end of his apprenticeship, the more clearly did he realize that he was in love with Johanna, and that she must be his little wife. When he thought of this, a smile brightened his face, and he drew the thread faster than before and pressed his foot against the knee strap. He didn't even pay any attention when he ran the awl deep into one of his fingers. He was determined that he would not play the silent lover like the 2 gingerbread cakes. The story had taught him a lesson. Now he was a journeyman, and his knapsack was packed ready for his trip. At last, for the first time in his life, he was to go to Copenhagen, where a master was already expecting him. How surprised and happy Johanna would be to see him. She was just 17 now, and he 19. I wanted to buy a gold ring for her before he left Kyoga, but then decided he could get a much nicer one in Copenhagen. And so he took leave of his parents, and on a rainy, windy day in autumn, set forth on foot from the town of his birth. The damp leaves were dropping from the trees, and he was wet to the skin when he arrived at his new master's home in the big city of Copenhagen. The following Sunday, he would pay a visit to Johanna's father, so on Sunday, he put on the new journeyman's clothes and the new hat from Kyoga that became him very well, for till then he had only worn a cap. He easily found the house he was seeking and mounted flight after flight of stairs until he became almost dizzy. It seemed terrible to him for people to live piled up on top of each other in this intricate city. Everything in the parlor looked prosperous, and Johanna's father received him in kindly friendship. Knud was a stranger to the new wife, but she too shook hands with him and gave him a cup of coffee. "Johanna will be glad to see you," said the father. "You've grown into a nice-looking young man. Yes, wait till you see her. There is a girl who rejoices my heart, and please God, she will rejoice it still more. She has her own room now, and pays us rent regularly for it." Then he knocked quite politely at his daughter's door, as if he were a stranger, and they went in. Oh, how pretty it was. He was certain there wasn't such a lovely room in all Kyoga. The queen herself could not be more charmingly lodged. There were carpets and window curtains that hung quite to the floor, and flowers, and pictures, and a velvet chair, and even a mirror as large as a door, and so clear there was a danger of walking into it. A glance showed all this to Knud, and yet he could look at nothing but Johanna. She was a full-grown maid, now quite different from Knud's memories of her, and much more beautiful. There wasn't a girl in Kyoga like her. How graceful she was, and with what a strange, unsure gaze she looked at Knud. But that was only for a moment, and then she rushed toward him as if to kiss him. She did not actually do so, but she very nearly did. Yes, she was really happy to see her childhood friend again. There were tears in Johanna's eyes. She had so much to say, and so many questions to ask about everything, from Knud's parents to the elder tree and the willow, which she called elder mother and willow father, just as if they had been human beings. And indeed, they might be called so, just as much as the gingerbread cakes. She spoke of them too, and their silent love, and how they had lain on the shop counter and broken in two. And at this, she laughed heartily, while the blood rushed to Knud's cheeks, and his heart beat faster and faster. No, she had not grown haughty at all, and Kenneth noticed quite well that it was because of her that her parents invited him to spend the evening. With her one hands, she poured out the tea and gave him a cup. And afterward, she read aloud to them from a book, and it seemed to Knud that what she read was all about himself and his love for it, matched with his thoughts. Then she sang a simple little song, but her singing made it a real story that seemed to be the outpouring of her very heart. Yes, Knud knew she cared for him. He could not keep tears of joy from rolling down his cheeks, nor could he speak a single word. He seemed struck dumb. But she pressed his hand and murmured, "You have a good heart, Knud. Stay always the way you are now." That was a magnificent evening. It was impossible to sleep afterward, and accordingly, Knud did not sleep. When he had left, Johanna's father had said, "Now don't forget us altogether. Don't let the whole winter go by before you come to us again." Knud felt that gave him permission to repeat the call the following Sunday, and determined to do so. But every evening after work, and the working hours lasted until candlelight there, Knud went out into the town. He returned to the street in which Johanna lived and looked up at her window. It was almost always lighted, and one evening he could even see the shadow of her face quite plainly on the curtain. That was an evening he would never forget. His master's wife did not like his gallivanting abroad every evening, as she put it, and shook her head ruefully over him. But the master only smiled. "He's just a young fellow," he said. "On Sunday we shall see each other," Knud thought, and I shall tell her how she is always in my thoughts, and that she must be my little wife. I know I'm only a poor journeyman shoemaker, but I can become a master, and I'll work and save. Yes, I'll tell her that no good comes from a silent love. I've learned that much from the gingerbread." Sunday came at last, and Knud set out. But to his great disappointment, they had to tell him they were all invited out that evening. But as he left, Johanna pressed his hand and said, "Have you ever been to the theater? You must go there sometime. I shall be singing on Wednesday, and if you have time that evening, I'll send you a ticket. My father knows where you are living." How kind it was of her, and at noon on Wednesday, he received a sealed envelope. There were no words inside, but the ticket was there. And that evening, Knud went to the theater for the first time in his life. And what did he see? He saw Johanna looking more charming and beautiful than he ever could have believed possible. To be sure, she was married to a stranger, but that was just in the play. It was only make-believe, as Knud understood very well. If it had been true, He thought she would never have had the heart to send him a ticket so that he could go and see it. And everybody shouted and applauded, and Knud cried out, "Hurrah!" Even the king was there, smiling at Johanna, and he seemed to delight in her loveliness. How small Knud felt then. Still he loved her dearly, and felt that she loved him too. But he knew it was up to the man to speak the first word, as the gingerbread maiden in the story had taught him. Indeed, there was a great deal of truth in that story. So as soon as Sunday came, he went to see her again, feeling as solemn as if he were going into a church. Johanna was at home alone. It could not have happened more fortunately. "I'm glad you came," she said. "I almost sent Father after you, but I felt in my heart that you would be here this evening. I have to tell you that I am leaving for France on Friday. I must study there if I am to become a great artista." At those words, it seemed to Knud as if the whole room were whirling round and round with him. He felt as if his heart would break. There were no tears in his eyes, but Johanna could not fail to see how stricken he was. "You honest, faithful soul," she said, and her tenderness loosened his tongue. He told her how much he loved her and begged her to become his little wife. Then he saw Johanna turn pale as she dropped his hand and said seriously and sadly, "Dear Knud, don't make us both unhappy. I shall always be a loving sister to you, one in whom you may trust, but I shall never be anything more." Gently, she placed her soft hand on his hot forehead. "God gives us the strength for much," she said, "if only we try to do our best." At that moment, her stepmother entered the room, and Johanna said, "Knud is quite heartbroken because I'm going away. Come be a man." And she laid her hand on his shoulder. It seemed as if they had been talking only of her journey. "You're a child," she laughed. "But now you must be good and reasonable as you used to be under the willow tree when we were both children." Knud felt as if the whole world were out of joint, and his thoughts were like a loose thread fluttering in the wind. He remained for tea, though he hardly knew if they had asked him to, and they were kind and gentle. And Johanna poured out his tea and sang to him. Her voice did not have its old tone, but still it was wonderfully beautiful and nearly broke his heart. And then they parted. Knud could not bear to offer his hand, but she took it and said, "Surely you'll shake hands with your sister at parting, old playmate." She smiled through the tears that were in her own eyes and repeated the word, "brother." Yes, that was supposed to be a great consolation. Such was their parting. She sailed for France, and Knud wandered about the muddy streets of Copenhagen. His comrades in the workshop asked why he was so gloomy, and urged him to join them and amuse himself, for he was still a young fellow. So they took him to a dance hall. He saw many pretty girls there, but there was not one to compare with Johanna. Here, where he had hoped to forget her, she was more vivid than ever before the eyes of his soul. God gives us the strength for much, she had said, if only we try to do our best. Then a devotion came to his mind, and he folded his hands quietly. The violins played, and the girls danced gaily. And suddenly, it seemed to him that he should never have brought Johanna into a place like this, for she was there with him in his heart. Knud ran out and wandered aimlessly through the streets. He passed by the house where she had lived. It was dark there. Everywhere were darkness and emptiness and loneliness. The world went in its way, and Knud went his. Winter set in, and the waters froze over. It was as if everything were preparing itself for burial. But when spring returned, and the first steamer was to start, an intense longing seized him to go away far into the world anywhere, but not too close to France. So he packed his knapsack and wandered deep into Germany, from town to town, finding rest and peace nowhere. It was not until he came to the glorious old city of Nuremberg that he could quiet his restless spirit, and there he decided to stay. Nuremberg is a strange old city, looking as if it had been cut out of an old-fashioned picture book. The streets seem to wander along just as they please. The houses did not like to stand in regular rows. Gables with little towers, arabesques, and pillars lean out over the walks and from the queer, peaked roofs. Waterspouts shaped like dragons or long, slim dogs push out far over the streets. There, in the Nuremberg marketplace, stood Knud, his knapsack on his back. He was beside one of the old fountains, where splendid bronze figures, scriptural and historical, rose up between the gushing jets of water. A pretty little servant girl was just filling her pails, and she gave Knud a refreshing drink. And as her hand was full of roses, she gave him one of them too, and he accepted that as a good sign. From the church, nearby came the strains of an organ. They rang as familiar to him as the tones of the organ at home in Kjøge Church, and he entered the great cathedral. The sunlight streamed in through the high, stained glass windows and down between the lofty, slender pillars. His spirit found rest, and Knud found a good master in Nuremberg, and he lived in his house, and there learned to speak German. The old moat around the town of Nuremberg has been converted into little kitchen gardens. but the high walls with their heavy towers are standing yet. The rope maker twists his cords on a wooden gallery along the inside of the town wall, where elder bushes grow out of the cracks and clefts, spreading their green branches over the small, lowly houses below. In one of these houses, Knud lived with his master, and over the little garret window where he slept, the elder tree waved its branches. Here he lived for a summer and winter. But when spring returned, he could bear it no longer, for the elder was blooming, and the fragrance of its blossoms carried him back to home and the garden at Kyoga. So Knud left that master and found another, farther in town, over whose house no elderbush blossomed. His new workshop was close to one of the old stone bridges, by an ever-foaming, low water mill. The stream roared past it, hemmed in by the houses whose decayed old balconies looked about to topple into the water. No elder grew here. There was not even a little green plant in a flower pot. But just opposite stood a grand old willow tree that seemed to cling fast to the house as if it feared being carried away by the stream. It stretched its branches out over the river, just as the willow at Kyoga spread its arms across the stream by the gardens of home. Yes, Knud had gone from the elder mother to the willow father. This tree had something especially on moonlit evenings that went straight to his heart, and that something was not of the moonlight, but of the old willow tree itself. He could not remain there. Why not? Ask the willow tree. Ask the blossoming elder. And so he bade farewell to his kind master and to Nuremberg, and traveled on further. To no one did he speak of Johanna, but hid his sorrow in his innermost heart. And he thought of the deep meaning of the old story of the gingerbread. Now he understood why the man had a bitter almond for a heart. He himself had felt the bitterness of it. And Johanna, who was always so gentle and smiling, she was only like the honey cake. The strap of Knud's knapsack seemed so tight across his chest that he could scarcely breathe. But even when he loosened it, he was not relieved. He saw only half the world around him. The other half he carried within him. That's how it was. Not until he was in sight of the high mountains did the world appear freer to him. Now his thoughts were turned outward again, and the tears came into his eyes. The Alps seemed to him like the folded wings of the earth. What if they were to unfold themselves and display their varied pictures of black woods, foaming, water's clouds, and great masses of snow? On the last day, he thought the world will lift up its mighty wings and mount upward to God, to burst like a soap bubble before the glance of the highest. Ah, he sighed, that last day were here now. Silently, he wandered through a country that seemed to him like an orchard covered with soft turf. From the wooden balconies of the houses, girls busy with their lace-making nodded down at him. The summits of the mountains glowed in the red evening sun. And when he saw the blue lakes gleaming through the dark trees, he thought of the seacoast near Kyoga, and there was a sadness in his heart. But it was pain no longer. There where the Rhine rolls onward like a great wave, and then bursts into snow-white, gleaming cloud-like masses, as if clouds were being created there, with the rainbow fluttering like a loose band above them. It was there that he thought of the mill at Kyoga with its rushing, foaming stream. He would have been glad to have remained in the quiet, Rhinish town. But here also there were too many elder trees and too many willows. So he traveled on over the mighty towering mountains, through shattered walls of rock, and on roads that clung to the mountainsides like the nests of swallows. The waters foamed in the depths. The clouds themselves were below him, and he strode on in the warm summer sun over shiny thistles, alpine roses, and snow. Thus he said farewell to the lands of the north, and journeyed on under the shade of blooming chestnut trees, and through vineyards and fields of maize. Now the mountains were a wall between him and all his memories. That was how he wished it to be. At last, he reached that great, glorious city called Milan, and here he found a German master who gave him work. The master and his wife, in whose workshop he labored now, were a pious old couple, and they became quite fond of the quiet journeyman, who said little but worked all the harder, and led a devout Christian life. And to Kenneth also, it seemed that God had lifted the heavy burden from his heart. His favorite relaxation was to climb from time to time to the mighty marble church, which seemed to him to have been built of the snow of his native Northland, formed into images, pointed towers, and decorated open halls. From every corner and every niche, the white statues smiled down upon him. Above him was the blue sky. Below him were the city and the wide-spreading green plains of Lombardy, and toward the north, the high mountains capped with perpetual snow. Then he thought of the church at Kyoga, with its raisa ivy-colored walls. But he did not long to go there again. Here beyond the mountains, he would be buried. I had lived there a year, and 3 years had passed since he had left his home, when one day his master took him into the city, not to the circus with its daring riders, no, to the great opera, where was an auditorium well worth seeing. There were 7 tiers of boxes, and from each beautiful silken curtains hung, while from the ground to the dizzy heights of the roof, There sat the most elegant ladies with corsages in their hands, as if they were at a ball, and gentlemen in full dress, many of them with decorations of gold and silver. It was as bright there as in the noonday sunshine, and the music rolled gloriously and beautifully. Everything was much more splendid than in the theater at Copenhagen. But then Johanna had been in Copenhagen, and here, yes, it was like magic. Johanna was here also. The curtain rose, and she appeared clad in silk and gold with a gold crown upon her head. She sang as none but an angel could sing, and came far forward to the front of the stage, and smiled as only Johanna could smile, and looked straight down at Knud. The poor boy seized his master's arm and called out aloud, "Johanna!" The loud music sounded above everything, but no one heard but the master, who nodded his head. "Yes," he said, "her name is Johanna." Then he drew forth his program and showed Knud her name, for the full name was printed there. No, it was not a dream. The great audience applauded and threw wreaths and flowers to Johanna, and every time she went away, they called her back on stage, so that she was always going and coming in the street outside. Afterward, the people crowded about her carriage and drew it away in triumph. Knud was in the first row and shouted as joyfully as any. And when the carriage halted before her brightly lighted house, he was standing close beside the door. It opened, and she stepped out. The light fell upon her beloved face, and she smiled, thanked them graciously, and appeared deeply touched. Knud looked straight into her eyes, and she into his, but she never knew him. A gentleman with a decoration glittering on his breast gave her his arm. People said they were betrothed. Then Knud went home and packed his knapsack. He had decided to return to his own home, to the elder and willow trees. Beneath the willow tree, the old couple begged him to remain, but no words could change his mind. It was in vain that they pointed out to him that winter was coming, and the snow had already fallen in the mountains. He replied that he could march with his knapsack on his back and supported by his cane in the wake of a slow-moving carriage for which a path would have to be cleared. So Knud left for the mountains and climbed up them and down them. His strength grew less, but still he saw no village or house. Always he plodded onward toward the north. High above him, the stars gleamed. His feet stumbled, and his head grew dizzy with the heights. Stars seemed to shine deep in the valley, too, as if there were another sky below him. He felt ill. More and more stars became visible below him. They glowed brighter and brighter and moved to and fro. Then he realized it was the lights of a little town that were shining down there. When he was sure of that, he put forth the last of his strength, and finally reached the shelter of a humble inn. He remained there that night, and the whole of the next day, for his body was in desperate need of rest and refreshment. The ice was beginning to thaw, and there was rain in the valley. But on the second morning, a man with a hand organ came to the inn and played a Danish melody. And now Knud could not remain. He resumed his journey northward, tramping on for many days, hurrying as though he were trying to reach home before all were dead there. But to no man did he speak of his longing, for no one would have believed in the sorrow of his spirit, the deepest a human heart can feel. Such grief is not for the world, for it is not amusing, nor is it for friends. And this man had no friends. A stranger, he wandered through strange lands toward his home in the north. He had received only one letter from home, and it was now years since his parents had written. You are not really Danish as we here at home. We love our country, but you love only a strange country. Thus his parents had written him. Yes, they thought they knew him. Now it was evening. He was tramping along the public highway. The frost had settled down, and the country had become flatter, with fields and meadows on all sides. And near the road there grew a great willow tree. The whole outlook reminded Knud strongly of home. It looked so Danish, and with a deep sigh, he sat down under the tree. He was very tired. His head began to nod, and his eyes closed in slumber. But still, he seemed to see the tree stretching its arms above him, and in his wandering fancy, the tree seemed to be a mighty old man, the willow father himself, carrying his tired son in his arms back to his Danish home, to the bare, bleak shore of Kyoga and the garden of his childhood. Yes, he dreamed that this was the willow tree of Kyoga that had traveled out into the world in search of him, and at last had found him, and had carried him back into the little garden beside the stream. And there stood Johanna, in all her splendor, with the golden crown on her head, just as he had seen her last, and she called out, "Welcome," to him. And before him stood two remarkable figures, looking much more human than he remembered them from his childhood. They had changed too, but they were still the two gingerbread cakes, the man and the maiden, that turned their right sides toward him and looked very handsome. "We thank you," both said to Knud. "You have loosened our tongues and taught us that thoughts should be spoken freely, or nothing will come of them. And now something has come of them. We are betrothed." Then they walked hand in hand through the street S of Kyoga and looked very respectable, even on the wrong side. No one could have found any fault with them. On they went straight toward Kyoga Church, and Knud and Johanna followed them. They, too, walked hand in hand. The church stood there, as it had always stood, with the beautiful green ivy growing on its red walls, and the great door of the church swung open, and the organ pealed, and the gingerbread couple walked up the aisle. "Our Master first," said the cake pair, and made room for Johanna and Knud to kneel before the altar. And she bent her head over him, and the tears fell from her eyes. But they were icy cold, for it was the ice around her heart that was melting, softened by his strong love. The tears fell upon his burning cheeks, and then he awoke, and he was sitting under the old willow tree in a foreign land on that cold winter evening. An icy hail from the Kuds was beating on his face. "That was the most wonderful hour of my life," he cried, "and it was just a dream. Oh God, let me dream again." Then he closed his eyes once more and dreamed again. Toward morning, there was a great snowstorm, and the wind blew it in drifts over him. And when the villagers came forth to go to church, they found a journeyman sitting by the roadside. He was dead, frozen to death beneath the willow tree. The Stone of the Wise Man. You know the story of Holger Danske, so we won't repeat it, but we'll ask you if you remember how Holger Danske conquered the great land of India eastward at the end of the world to the tree called the Tree of the Sun. As Kristen Pedersen says, do you know Kristen Pedersen? It makes no difference if you don't. Holger Danske gave Prester John his power and rule over India. Have you heard about Prester John? Yes? Well, it makes no difference if you haven't, because he doesn't come into our story. You are going to hear about the Tree of the Sun. In India, eastward at the end of the world. As people believed it to be then, for they hadn't studied their geography the way we have, but that makes no difference either. The Tree of the Sun was a magnificent tree, such as we have never seen, and most likely never will see. Its crown stretched out for miles around. It was really an entire wood, for each of its smallest branches formed in turn a whole tree. Palms, beech, pines, plane trees. Yes, and many other kinds of trees grew here, trees that are to be found all over the world. They sprang forth as small branches from the great branches, and these, with their knots and windings, were like hills and valleys, carpeted with soft, velvety green, and covered with thousands of flowers. Each branch was like a great blooming meadow, or the most beautiful garden. The blessed sun shone down upon it, for remember, it was the Tree of the Sun. Here the birds from all over the world gathered together. Birds from the primeval forests of America, the rose gardens of Damascus, or the wild woods of Africa. where the elephant and the lion imagine that they alone reign. Polar birds came here, and the stork and swallow naturally did too. But the birds were not the only living creatures here. The stag, the squirrel, the antelope, and hundreds of other beautiful and light-footed animals were at home in this place. The crown of the tree was a spreading, fragrant garden, and in the very center of it, where the great branches rose up into a green hill, there stood a castle of crystal with a view toward every country in the world. Each tower rose up in the form of a lily, and one could ascend through the stem, for inside there were winding stairs. One could step out onto the leaves. These were the balconies. And up in the cup of the flower was a beautiful, brilliant, round hall with no roof above it, only the blue sky with either the sun or the stars. Down below in the wide halls of the castle, there was just as much splendor, though of a different sort. Here, the whole world was reflected on the walls. One could see everything that happened. So there was no need to read newspapers. There were no newspapers here anyway. Everything could be seen in living pictures if one wanted to or was able to see it all. For too much is too much even for the wisest man. And the wisest of all men lived here. His name is too difficult for you to pronounce, and it makes no difference anyway. He knew everything that a man on earth can know or hope to know. He knew every invention that had been made or was yet to be made. But he knew nothing more than that, for everything in the world has its limits. Wise old King Solomon was only half as wise as this man, and yet he was very wise indeed, and governed the forces of nature and ruled over mighty spirits. Even death itself was forced to report every morning with a list of those who were to die during the day. But King Solomon himself had to die too, and this was the thought that often occupied the mind of the learned, mighty ruler of the castle on the tree of the sun. However high he might rise above men in wisdom, he also must die someday. He knew that he and his children, too, must fade like the leaves of the forest and become dust. He could see the human race fade away like leaves on the trees, and new men come forth to take their places. But the leaves that fell never lived again. They became dust about other plants. What happened to man when the angel of death came to him? What could death be? The body became decayed. And the soul? Yes, what was the soul? What became of it? Where did it go? To the life eternal. The comforting voice of religion said. But what was the transition? Where did one dwell? And how in heaven above, said the pious people. It is there we go. Above, repeated the wise man, and gazed up at the moon and stars. Up there, from the earthly globe, he saw that above and below could be one and the same, depending upon where one stood on the revolving earth. And if he ascended as high as the earth's loftiest mountains, rear their peaks there in the air that we below call clear and transparent, the pure heaven would be a black darkness spread over all like a cloth, and the sun would have a coppery glow without giving forth rays, and our earth would lie wrapped in an orange mist. How narrow were the limits of the mortal eye, and how little could be seen by the eye of the soul. Even the wisest knew little of that which is the most important of all to us. In the most secret chamber of that castle lay earth's greatest treasure, the book of truth. Page after page, the wise man had read it through. Every man may read in this book, but only parts of it. Too many. And the letters seem to fade, so that the words cannot even be spelled. On some pages, the writing is so pale that they seem like blank leaves. But the wiser a man becomes, the more he can read. And the wisest men read the most. The wise man knew how to unite the sunlight and the starlight with the light of reason and the hidden powers of his soul. And under this dazzling light, many things stood out clearly on the pages before him. But in the chapter of the book entitled Life After Death, there was not so much as one single letter to see. That grieved him. Could he not, somewhere on earth, obtain a light by which everything written in the book of truth would become clear to him? Likewise, King Solomon, he understood the language of the animals and could interpret their talk and their songs. But that made him none the wiser. He had learned the powers of plants and metals, powers that could be used for the cure of diseases or for delaying death, but none that could destroy death. In all created things that he could reach, he sought the light that would shine upon the certainty of eternal life, but he did not find it. Blank leaves still appeared in the book of truth before him. Christianity gave him words of promise of an eternal life in the Bible, but he wanted to read it in his book, and there he could see nothing about it. The wise man had 5 children, 4 sons, educated, as well as the sons of the wisest of fathers should be, and a daughter, lovely, gentle, and clever, but blind. Yet this affliction was no deprivation to her, for her father and brothers were mortal eyes to her, and her own keen perception gave her clear mental vision. The sons had never ventured farther from the castle than the extent of the branches of the tree, nor had the sister ever left the home. They were happy children, in the home of their childhood, the beautiful, fragrant tree of the sun. Like all children, they were happy to have stories told them, and their father told them many things that other children would never have understood. But these children were as clever as most of our old people are. He explained to them the pictures of life that they saw on the castle walls, the labors of men, and the march of events in all the lands of the earth. Often, the sons wished that they could go into the world and take part in the great deeds of other men. And then their father explained to them that it was hard and wearisome out in the world, that the world was not as they saw it from their beautiful home. I told them of the good, the true, and the beautiful, and explained that these three clung together in the world, and that under the pressure they endured, they hardened into a precious stone, purer than the water of a diamond, a splendid jewel of value to God Himself, whose brightness outshone all things. This was called the stone of the wise man. He told them that just as man could gain knowledge of the existence of God by seeking it, so was it within the power of man to gain proof that such a jewel as the stone of the wise man existed. This explanation would have been beyond the understanding of other children, but these children could grasp it, and in time other children too will learn to understand its meaning. They asked their father about the true, the beautiful, and the good, and he told them many things. How when God made man from the dust of the earth, He gave to his work 5 kisses, fiery kisses, heart kisses, which we now call the 5 senses. Through these, that which is the true, the beautiful, and the good is seen, felt, and understood. Through them, it is valued, protected, and augmented. 5 senses have been given physically and mentally, inwardly and outwardly, to body and soul. By day and by night, the children thought deeply about all these things. Then the eldest of the brothers had a wonderful dream, and strangely enough, the second brother had the same dream, and the third did too, and the fourth. All of them dreamed exactly the same thing. They dreamed that each went out into the world and found the stone of the wise man, which gleamed like a radiant light on his forehead. When in the morning dawn, he rode his swift horse back over the velvety green meadows of home to the castle of his father. Then the jewel threw such a divine light and brilliance upon the pages of the book that everything written there on the life beyond the grave was illuminated. But the sister dreamed nothing about venturing out into the world, for it had never entered her mind. Her world was her father's castle. "I shall ride out into the wide world," said the eldest brother. "I must find what life is like there and mix with people. I shall do only what is good and true, and with these I shall protect the beautiful. Many things shall change for the better when I am there. Yes, his thoughts were bold and big, as our thoughts always are at home before we have gone out into the world and have met with wind and rain thorns and thistles. Now in all of these brothers, the five senses were highly developed, both inwardly and outwardly. But in each of them, one sense had reached a keenness surpassing the other four. In the case of the eldest, this outstanding sense was sight. This was to be of special benefit to him. He had eyes for all times, he said, and eyes for all nations, eyes that could look into the very depths of the earth, where treasures lie hidden, or into the depths of people's hearts, as though only a clear pane of glass were before them. In other words, he saw more than we could in the cheek that blushes or turns pale, in the eye that cries or laughs. Stags and antelopes escorted him to the western boundaries of his home, and there the wild swans received him and led him on into the northwest. And now he was far out into the world, far from the land of his father, which extended eastward to the ends of the earth. How widely his eyes opened in amazement. There were many things to be seen here, and things appear very different when a man look at them with his own eyes, instead of merely in a picture as he had done in his father's house. However good the picture may be, and those in his father's house were unusually good. At first, he nearly lost his eyes in astonishment at all the rubbish, all the carnival-like decorations that were supposed to represent the beautiful. But he did not quite lose them, and soon found full use for them. He wished to work thoroughly and honestly to understand the beautiful, the true, and the good. But how were these represented in the world? He saw that often the praise which by right belonged to the beautiful was given to the ugly, that the good was often overlooked, and mediocrity was applauded when it should have been hissed. People looked at the dress, and not at the wearer, asked for a name instead of a value, and were guided more by reputation than by worth. It was the same everywhere. I must attack these things, he thought, and he did so. But while he was seeking the truth, there came the devil, who is the father of all lies. Gladly would he have plucked out the eyes of this seer, but that would have been too blunt, for the devil works in a more cunning way. He let him continue to seek and see the true and the good. But while the young man was doing so, the devil blew a mote into his eye, into both eyes, one mote after another. This, of course, would harm even the clearest sight. Then the fiend blew upon the motes until they became beams, and the eyes were destroyed. There the seer stood like a blind man in the great world, and had no faith in it, for he had lost his good opinion of it and of himself. And when a man loses confidence in the world and himself, it is all over with him. All over, sang the wild swans flying across the sea toward the east. All over, repeated the swallows, also flying eastward toward the tree of the sun. It was not good news that they were carrying to the young man's home. The seer must have done badly, said the second brother, but the hearer may have better luck. For in this son, the sense of hearing was developed to a very high degree. So keen was it that he could hear the very grass grow. He lovingly bade farewell and rode away from home full of sound abilities and good intentions. The swallows followed him, and he followed the swans until he was far from his home, far out in the wide world. Then he discovered that one may have too much of a good things, for his hearing was too fine. Not only could he hear the grass grow, but he could hear every man's heart beat, whether in sorrow or in joy. To him, the whole world was like the great workshop of a clockmaker, with all the clocks going tick-tock, and all the tower clocks striking ding-dong. The noise was unbearable. For a long time his ears held out, but at last all the noise, the shrieking, became too much for one man. Then street boys of some 60 years of age, for years alone don't make men, raised a tumult at which the hearer would have laughed, except for the slanderous talk that followed and echoed through every house and street. It was heard even in the country lanes. Falsehood pushed itself forward and pretended to be the master. Bells on the fools' caps jangled and insisted they were church bells, until the noise became too much for the hearer, and he thrust his fingers into his ears. But still, he could hear false singing and evil sounds, gossip and idle words, scandal and slander, groaning and moaning on all sides, none of it worth listening to. Heaven help us. It was impossible to endure. It was all too mad. He thrust his fingers deeper and deeper into his ears, until at last his eardrums burst. Now he heard nothing at all. He could not hear the true, the beautiful, and the good. His hearing was to have been the bridge by which he would have crossed to it. He became morose and suspicious, at last trusting no one, not even himself. And that was most unfortunate. He would not be able to discover and bring home the divine jewel, and so he gave up. He even gave himself up, and that was the worst of all. The birds that flew eastward brought the tidings of this also to the father's castle in the tree of the sun. No letters arrived there, for there was no mail service. "Now I'll try," said the third brother. "I have a sharp nose." It wasn't a very good practice for him to boast like that. But that was his way, and we must take him as he was. He had a happy disposition and was a poet, a great poet. He could sing many things that he could not speak, and ideas came to him far more quickly than they did to others. "I can smell a rat," he said. And it was his highly developed sense of smell to which he attributed his great range of knowledge about the realm of the beautiful. Every fragrant spot in the realm of the beautiful has its denizens, he said. Some like the smell of apple. Some like the smell of a stable. One man is at home in the atmosphere of the tavern, among the smoking tallow candles, where the smell of spirits mingles with the fumes of cheap tobacco. Another prefers to be near the heavy scent of jessamine, or to scent himself with strong oil of cloves. Some seek the fresh sea breezes, while others climb the highest mountain to look down on the bustling little life beneath. Yes, thus he spoke. It seemed to him as if he had already been out in the wide world and known people from close association with them. But this conviction arose from within himself. It was the poet within him, the gift heaven had bestowed on him in his cradle. Abo, farewell to his ancestral home in the tree of the sun, and went on foot through the pleasant countryside. When he arrived at the boundaries of his home, he mounted an ostrich which runs faster than a horse. And when he later met the wild swans, he swung himself onto the strongest of them, for he loved variety. Away he flew across the sea to distant lands of great forests, deep lakes, towering mountains, and proud cities. And wherever he appeared, it seemed as if sunlight traveled with him across the countryside, for every flower and bush gave forth a new fragrance, conscious that nearby was a friend and protector who understood them and knew their value. Then the crippled rosebush stretched its branches, opened its leaves, and gave bloom to the most beautiful roses. Even the black, slimy wood snail saw its beauty. "I will put my mark on the flower," said the snail. "Now I have spit on it, and there is nothing more I can do for it." Thus the beautiful always fares in this world, said the poet. Then he sang a song about it in his own way, but nobody listened. So he gave a drummer 2 pennies and peacock's feather, and then arranged the song for the drum, and had it drummed throughout the town in all the streets and lanes. When the people heard it, they said that they understood it. It was very profound, and so the poet sang other songs about the beautiful, the good, and the true. And people listened to among the smoking tavern candles, listened in the fresh meadows, in the forests, and on the high seas. It seemed as if this brother was going to have better luck than the other 2. But that angered the devil. And so he promptly set to work with all the incense powder and smoke to be found the very strongest which can stifle anyone, and which he can prepare artfully enough to even confuse an angel. And surely, therefore, a poor poet. The devil knows how to take hold of a man like that. He surrounded the poet so completely with incense that the poor man lost his head, forgot his mission, his home, everything, even himself. He then vanished in smoke. When the little birds heard about this, they were sad, and for 3 days they didn't sing. The black wood snail became blacker still, not from grief, but from envy. They should have burned incense for me, he said, for it was I who gave him the idea for the most famous of his songs, the drum song about the way of the world. It was I who spat at the rose. I can bring witnesses to prove that. But no news of this reached the poet's home in India, for all the little birds were mourning and silent for 3 days. And when their time of mourning was over, their grief had been so profound that they had forgotten for whom they wept. That's the way it goes. Now, I'll have to go into the world and stay away like the others, said the fourth brother. I had as good a humor as the third, though he was no poet, which was a fine reason for him to have a good humor. Those two had filled the castle with gaiety, and now the last of that gaiety was leaving. Men have always considered sight and hearing the two most important senses, those that it is most desirable to strengthen and sharpen. The other 3 senses are generally looked upon as subordinate. But that was not the belief of this son, for he had especially cultivated his taste in every way possible. And taste is very powerful indeed. It governs what goes into the mouth and into the mind. Hence, this brother tasted everything there was in pots and pans, in bottles and barrels, explaining that this was the uncouth side of his function. To him, every man was a vessel with something cooking within, and every country was an enormous kitchen, a kitchen of the mind. This he considered fine indeed, and he wanted to go out into the world and taste of it. Perhaps I'll have better luck than my brothers. I shall be on my way. But how shall I travel? Are balloons invented yet? He asked his father, who knew about all inventions that had been made or would be in the future. But men had not yet invented balloons or steamships or railways. Then I'll go by balloon, he said. My father knows how they're made and steered, and that I can learn. They aren't invented yet, so people will think it's some spirit of the air. When I have finished with the balloon, I'll burn it. And for that, you must give me some pieces of another invention to come. Matches. When he had received what he wanted, he flew away. The birds flew much farther along with him than they had with his brothers. They were curious to know how the flight would come out, for they thought it was some new kind of bird. More and more came sweeping up until the air was black with birds. They came on like the cloud of locusts over the land of Egypt. And so now he, the last brother, was out in the wide world. The east wind is a good friend and helper to me, he said. You mean the east wind and the west wind, said the winds. You couldn't have flown northwest if we both hadn't helped you. But he didn't hear what the wind said, and that makes no difference. The birds tired of flying along with the balloon. Too much had been made of that thing, said a pair of them. It had become conceited. It isn't worth flying with. It's nothing. And then they withdrew. They all withdrew, for indeed too much had been made of nothing. The balloon descended over one of the greatest cities, and the aeronaut landed on the highest point, the church steeple. The balloon rose into the air again, which it shouldn't have done. We don't know where it went, but that doesn't matter, for it was not yet invented. There, the young man sat on the church steeple, the birds no longer hovering around him. He had grown as tired of them as they had of him. All the chimneys of the town smoked fragrantly. Those are altars erected in your honor, said the wind, which thought it ought to say something pleasant. He sat up there boldly and gazed down at the people in the streets. One person was prancing along, proud of his purse. Another was proud of the key that hung at his girdle, though he had nothing for it to unlock. One was proud of his moth-eaten coat, another of his worm-eaten body. Vanity, he said. I must go down, dip my fingers into that pot, and taste it. But I'll sit here a little longer, for the wind is blowing very pleasantly against my back. I'll take a little rest. It is good to sleep long in the mornings when one has much to do. The lazy man says, laziness is the root of all evil. But there is no evil in our family. I'll stay here as long as the wind blows, for it feels good. So he sat there. But since he was sitting on the weathercock of the steeple, which turned round and round with him, he had the false idea that the same wind was still blowing. So he remained seated there. He might as well stay a long while and have a good taste. Back in India, in the castle of the Tree of the Sun, it had become empty and quiet after the brothers, one after another, had gone away. Things are going badly with them, said the father. Never will they bring home the gleaming jewel. It is not for me. They are all dead and gone. And then he bent over the book of truth and gazed at the page that should have told him of life after death. But there was nothing for him to see or learn from it. Now his blind daughter was his sole joy and consolation. She clung to him with deep affection, and for the sake of his happiness and peace of mind, she wished the precious jewel might be discovered and brought home. With sorrow and longing, she thought of her brothers. Where were they? Where could they be living? With all her heart, she wished she might dream of them, but strangely enough, not even in her dreams could she reach them. At last one night, she dreamed that their voices sounded across to her, calling to her from out in the wide world, and she could not hold back, but traveled far, far away. And yet she seemed still to be in her father's house. She never met her brothers, but in her dream she felt a sort of fire burning in her hand that did not pain her. It was the shining jewel she was bringing to her father. When she awoke, she thought for a moment that she still held the stone in her hand, but it was the mum of her distaff that she was grasping. Through that long night, she had spun incessantly, and on the distaff was a thread finer than the finest spider's web. Human eyes could not distinguish the separate threads in it, so fine were they. She had moistened it with her tears, and it was as strong as a rope. She arose. Her decision was made. The dream must become a reality. It was still night, and her father was sleeping. She pressed a kiss on his hand, and then, taking her distaff, fastened the end of the thread to her father's castle. But for this, in her blindness, she would never have been able to find her way home. She must hold fast to that thread and trust neither to herself nor to others. From the tree of the sun, she broke off 4 leaves. These she would entrust to the winds to bring to her brothers as letters of greeting, in case she should not meet them out there in the wide world. How could she fare, that poor blind child? She could hold fast to her invisible thread. She possessed one gift that all the others lacked: sensibility. And by virtue of this, she seemed to have eyes in the very tips of her fingers and ears in her heart. Then she went forth quietly into the noisy, whirling, strange world. And wherever she went, the sky became so bright with sunshine that she could feel the warm rays, and the rainbow spread itself through the blue air where there had been dark clouds. She heard the birds sing and smelled the scent of orange groves and apple orchards so strongly that she seemed to taste the fruit. Soft tones and delightful sounds reached her ears, but with them came howlings and roarings. Manifold thoughts and opinions strangely contradicted each other. The echoes of human thoughts and feelings penetrated into the depths of her heart. One chorus sounded mournfully: "Our earthly life is filled with mist and rain, and in the dark of night we cry with pain. But then she heard a brighter strain. Our earthly life is like a rose bush so bright. It is filled with sunshine and true delight. And if one chorus sounded bitterly, each person thinks of himself alone. This truth to us is often shown. From the other side came the answer. Throughout our life, a fairy of love guides our steps from heaven above. She could hear the words, "There's pettiness here far and wide. Everything has its wrong side." But then she heard, "So much good is done here that never reaches man's ear." And if sometimes the mocking words sounded to her, "Make fun of everything, laugh in jest, laugh along with all the rest," a stronger voice came from the blind girl's heart. "Trust in God and thyself. Pray then, His will be done forever. Amen." Whenever the blind girl entered the circle of humanity and appeared among people, young or old, knowledge of the true, the good and the beautiful was radiant in their hearts. Wherever she went, whether she entered the studio of the artist or the hall decorated for the feast, or the crowded factory with its whirring wheels, it seemed as though a sunbeam were entering, as though the string of a lute sounded, or a flower exhaled its perfume, or a refreshing dewdrop fell upon a withering leaf. But the devil could not put up with this. With more cunning than that of 10,000 men, he devised a way to bring about his purpose. From the marsh, he collected little bubbles of stagnant water and muttered over them a sevenfold echo of untrue words to give them strength. Then he blended, bought heroic poems and lying epitaphs, as many as he could find, boiled them in the tears of envy, colored them with grease paint he had scraped from the faded cheeks of an old lady, and from all this he fashioned a maiden with the appearance and carriage of the blind girl, the blessed angel of sensibility. Then the devil's plot was consummated, for the world knew not which of the two was the true one. And indeed, how could the world know? Trust in God and thyself. Pray then, His will be done forever. Amen. Sang the blind girl in complete faith. Then she entrusted to the winds the 4 green leaves from the tree of the sun as letters of greeting to her brothers, and she was quite sure that they would reach their destinations and the jewel be found, the jewel that dims all the glories of the world. From the forehead of humanity, it would gleam even to the house of her father, even to the house of my father, she repeated. Yes, the place of the jewel is on this earth, and I shall bring with me more than the promise of it. I can feel its glow. In my closed hand, it swells larger and larger. Every grain of truth, however fine it was, which the wind whirled toward me, I caught up and treasured. I let penetrate into it the fragrance of the beautiful, of which there is so much in the world, even for the blind. To the first, I added the sound of the beating heart doing good. I bring only dust with me, but still it is the dust of the jewel we sought, and it is in ample quantity. I have my whole hand full of it. Then she stretched forth her hand toward her father. She was home. She had traveled there with the swiftness of thoughts in flight, having never let go of the invisible thread leading to home. With the fury of a hurricane, the evil powers swept over the tree of the sun, and their wind blasts rushed through the open doorway into the sanctuary of the Book of Truth. "It will be blown away by the wind," cried the father, and he seized the hand she had opened. "Never," she replied with calm assurance. "It cannot be blown away. I can feel the rays warming my very soul." And the father became aware of a dazzling flame right where the shining dust poured from her hand onto the Book of Truth that would grant the certainty of an everlasting life. Now on the white page there glowed no shining word, one word only: believe. And once more the four brothers were with their father and sister. When the green leaf had fallen upon the bosom of each, a great longing for home had taken hold of them and led them back. The birds of passage had followed them, as had the stag, the antelope, and all the wild creatures of the forest, for all wished to share in their joys. And why shouldn't they, when they could? We have often seen how a column of dust whirls around, where a sunbeam bursts through a crack in a door into a dusty room. But this was not common, insignificant dust. Even the colors of the rainbow are lifeless compared with the beauty that showed itself here. From the page of the book, from the glowing word, believe arose each grain of truth, decked with the loveliness of the beautiful and the good, flaming more brightly than the mighty pillar of fire that led Moses and the children of Israel to the land of Canaan. And from the word believe arose the bridge of hope, extending to the eternal love in the realm of the infinite. The races, a prize, or rather, two prizes, a great one and a small one, had been awarded for the greatest swiftness in running, not in a single race, but for the whole year. "I obtained the first prize," said the hare. "Justice must still be carried out, even when one has relations and good friends among the prize committee. But that the snail should have received the second prize, I consider almost an insult to myself." "No," said the fence rail, who had been a witness at the distribution of prizes. "There should be some consideration for industry and perseverance. I have heard many respectable people say so, and I can quite understand it. The snail certainly took half a year to get over the threshold of the door. But he injured himself and broke his collarbone by the haste he made. He gave himself up entirely to the race and ran with his house on his back, which was, all of course, very praiseworthy. And therefore, he obtained the second prize. "I think I ought to have had some consideration too," said the swallow. "I should imagine no one can be swifter in soaring and flight than I am. And how far I have been, far, far away." "Yes, that is your misfortune," said the fence rail. You are so fickle, so unsettled. You must always be traveling about into foreign lands when the cold commences here. You have no love of fatherland in you. There can be no consideration for you. But now, if I have been lying the whole winter in the moor," said the swallow, "and suppose I slept the whole time, would that be taken into account? Bring a certificate from the old moor-hen," said he, "that you have slept away half your time in fatherland. Then you will be treated with some consideration." "I deserved the first prize, and not the second," said the snail. "I know so much, at least, that the hare only ran from cowardice, and because he thought there was danger in delay. I, on the other hand, made running the business of my life, and have become a cripple in the service. If anyone had a first prize, it ought to have been myself. But I do not understand chattering and boasting. On the contrary, I despise it." And the snail spat at them with contempt. "I am able to affirm with word of oath that each prize, at least those for which I voted, was given with just and proper consideration," said the old boundary post in the wood, who was a member of the committee of judges. "I always act with due order, consideration, and calculation. 7 times have I already had the honor to be present at the distribution of the prizes and to vote. But today is the first time I have been able to carry out my will. I always reckon the first prize by going through the alphabet from the beginning, and the second by going through from the end. Be so kind as to give me your attention, and I will explain to you how I reckon from the beginning. The 8th letter from A is H, and there we have H for hare. Therefore, I awarded to the hare the first prize. The 8th letter from the end of the alphabet is S, and therefore the snail received the second prize. Next year, the letter I will have its turn for the first prize, and the letter R for the second. I should really have voted for myself, said the mule, if I had not been one of the judges on the committee. Not only the rapidity with which advance is made, but every other quality should have due consideration. As for instance, how much weight a candidate is able to draw. But I have not brought this quality forward now, nor the sagacity of the hare in his flight, nor the cunning with which he suddenly springs aside and doubles to lead people on a false track thinking he has concealed himself. No, there is something else on which more stress should be laid, and which ought not be left unnoticed. I mean, that which mankind call the beautiful. It is on the beautiful that I particularly fix my eyes. I observed the well-grown ears of the hare. It is a pleasure to me to observe how long they are. It seemed as if I saw myself again in the days of my childhood. And so I voted for the hare. Buzz, said the fly. There, I'm not going to make a long speech, but I wish to say something about hares. I have really overtaken more than one hare when I have been seated on the engine in front of a railway train. I often do so. One can then so easily judge of one's own swiftness. Not long ago, I crushed the hind legs of a young hare. He had been running a long time before the engine. He had no idea that I was traveling there. At last, he had to stop in his career, and the engine ran over his hind legs and crushed them, for I sat upon it. I left him lying there and rode on farther. I call that conquering him, but I do not want the prize. It really seems to me, thought the wild rose, though she did not express her opinion aloud. It is not in her nature to do so, though it would have been quite as well if she had. It certainly seems to me that the sunbeam ought to have had the honor of receiving the first prize. The sunbeam flies in a few minutes along the immeasurable path from the sun to us. It arrives in such strength that all nature awakes to loveliness and beauty. We roses blush and exhale fragrance in its presence. Our worshipful judges don't appear have noticed this at all. Were I the sunbeam, I would give each one of them a sunstroke, but that would only make them mad, and they are mad enough already. I only hope, continued the rose, that peace may reign in the wood. It is glorious to bloom, to be fragrant, and to live in story and in song. The sunbeam will outlive us all. What is the first prize? Asked the earthworm, who had overslept the time and only now came up. It contains a free admission to a cabbage garden, replied the mule. I proposed that one of the prizes. The hare most decidedly must have it, and I, as an active and thoughtful member of the committee, took especial care that the prize should be one of advantage to him. So now he is provided for. The snail can now sit on the fence and lick up moss and sunshine. He has also been appointed one of the first judges of swiftness in racing. It is worth much to know that one of the numbers is a man of talent in the thing men call a committee. I must say, I expect much in the future. We have already made such a good beginning. Heartache. The little history I am about to tell is as so many are divided into two unequal halves. The first might easily be omitted by the impatient listener, and yet, without it, the second would seem almost too abrupt, too bare of meaning. So let us begin at the beginning, where all things truly begin, quietly, unassumingly, without the faintest hint of the sorrow that lies waiting beyond the turn of the page. We were residing at a country manor, a stately old house with whitewashed walls and tall windows that caught the afternoon sun. Its owner, a gentleman of distinction, had been called away for a few days on business. The air was heavy with the smell of summer fields and tanned leather, for the nearby town was known for its tanneries, and so it happened that one morning a lady arrived from that very town, a plump, courteous widow with a nervous little pug dog tucked beneath her arm. She came, she explained, to settle a matter of property shares in her late husband's tannery, and had brought with her the certificates neatly folded and tied with blue ribbon. She was a woman of order, of tidy habits, and small anxieties. We, wishing to assist, advised her to seal the papers in an envelope. Write upon it the title and address of the proprietor of the estate, General War Commissary Knight, and so forth, and leave it in our keeping until the master's return. The lady agreed at once, but as she took up the pen and dipped it in ink, her hand trembled slightly. "Be so kind," she said softly, as to repeat the address once more slowly. We complied. She wrote, her brow wrinkling with care, until midway through General War. She stopped, sighed deeply, and said with a little half laugh, half sigh, "Ah, but I'm only a woman. I'm only a..." While she wrote her pug. Puggy had been placed on the floor. He did not like it. He was a round-bodied creature with a blunt nose and folds of velvet skin along his back, and he expressed his displeasure by growling in a manner that was more comical than fierce. "He doesn't bite," said the widow. "Poor soul, he hasn't a tooth in his head. He's like one of the family, faithful but bad-tempered, though that's no fault of his own. My grandchildren tease him, you see. They play wedding, and he must be bridesmaid dressed up in lace and ribbons. It's all too much for the old gentleman." She sealed her envelope, took up Puggy, again, with a tenderness one reserves for a frail child, and departed in her little carriage. That was the end of the first part of the story, the part, as I said, which might well have been left untold. A week later, the second part began. We arrived in the same town and lodged at a small inn whose windows overlooked the tannery yard. The place was divided by a high wooden fence. On one side were raw hides, brown and stiff, stretched across racks to dry in the sun, and on the other were neat piles of finished leather, soft and yellow as parchment. The air was thick with the sharp, sour odor of tanning, a smell that spoke of labor and livelihood. That morning, poor Puggy had died. The widow's grandchildren, for he had never married, were preparing his funeral in the far corner of the yard. They were earnest about it, as children are about all ceremonies of their own invention. They dug a little grave and bordered it carefully with broken flower pots. They filled it with clean sand, and at its head planted an empty beer bottle, neck upwards, not symbolic, perhaps, but proudly ornamental in their eyes. When all was ready, they danced around the grave. Then the eldest boy, a practical fellow of 7, with a shock of yellow hair, proposed an idea. "Let's have an exhibition," he said. "Let's show Puggy's grave to everyone on the street. Admission, 1 trouser button." It was a fine plan, and the others clapped in agreement. Buttons, after all, were universal currency. Each boy had at least one to spare, and if not, could borrow from his suspenders. Before long, the narrow street was filled with visitors. Boys and girls came running, each paying his button at the gate. Some went home afterward with only one suspender to hold their trousers, but they did not mind. They had seen Puggy's grave, and that was a sight worth any price. Outside the gate, however, stood one child who did not enter. She was a little girl, poorly dressed, but strikingly lovely, with tangled golden curls and eyes of the clearest blue eyes that seemed to hold all the brightness of a morning sky after rain. She said nothing, merely watched as the others went in and out, her lips pressed together, her small hands clasped before her. She had no button. She knew it, and said not a word. When the last visitor had left, and the laughter had faded into the alley, she crept to the gate, peered in once more, and then sat down on the ground. There, with her thin brown fingers covering her face, she began to sob softly, at first, then with the deep, helpless grief only a child can feel. She had not seen Puggy's grave. To her, it was a loss vast and terrible, a sorrow as real as any that weighs upon grown hearts. We watched from above, from the window of our room at the inn, and as so often happens when we look down upon the small tragedies of life, we smiled. For from such a distance, be it from a window or from years gone by, sorrow itself takes on a strange gentleness, almost a beauty. That, dear reader, is the whole of the tale. Whoever fails to understand it may go and buy a share in the widow's tannery for the price of comprehension. Like the price of admission is small, yet few are willing to pay it.